So we're going to read tonight from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 17, text number 1. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya, Jai Nityananda, Jai Dvaita Chandra, Jai Gaur Bhaktavrinda. So this text is spoken by the author, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Vande Svarad Bhute Ham Tam Chaitanyam Yat Prasadataha Yavana Sumanayante Krishna Nama Prajalpakaha. Let me offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by whose mercy even unclean Yavanas become perfectly well-bred gentlemen, by chanting the holy name of the Lord. Such is the power of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Purport. There is a persistent misunderstanding between caste Brahmanas and advanced Vaishnavas or Goswamis, because caste Brahmanas or Smartas are of the opinion that one cannot become a Brahmana unless he changes his body. As we have discussed several times, it is to be understood that by the supremely powerful potency of the Lord, as described by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, everything is possible. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is as fully independent as Krishna, therefore no one can interfere with his activities. If he wants, by his mercy, he can convert even a Yavana, an unclean follower of non-Vedic principles, into a perfectly well-behaved gentleman. This is actually happening in our propagation of the Krishna consciousness movement. The members of the present Krishna consciousness movement were not born in India, nor do they belong to the Vedic culture. But within the short time of 4 or 5 years, they've become such wonderful devotees simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra that even in India they are well received as perfectly well-behaved Vaishnavas wherever they go. Although less intelligent men cannot understand it, this is the special power of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Actually, the body of a Krishna-conscious person changes in many ways. Even in the United States, when our devotees chant on the street, American ladies and gentlemen inquire from them whether they are actually Americans, because no one could expect Americans to become such nice devotees all of a sudden. Even Christian priests are greatly surprised that all these boys from Jewish and Christian families have joined this Krishna consciousness movement. Before joining, they never regarded any principles of religion seriously, but now they have become sincere devotees of the Lord. Everywhere people express this astonishment, and we take great pride in the transcendental behaviour of our students. Such wonders are possible, however, only by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They are not ordinary or mundane. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Translation again. Let me offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by whose mercy even unclean Yavanas become perfectly well-bred gentlemen by chanting the holy name of the Lord. Such is the power of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So a Yavana, Prabhupada translates this word Yavana as even the unclean. Unclean meaning someone who is not part of the Vedic culture or part of a real human civilization. Samanayante, are transformed into gentlemen. So this is what we wanted to discuss today. How to become a gentleman or a lady for Krishna. The main process is discussed in the last line of the verse. Krishna Nama Prajalpaka. Krishna Nama, of the holy name of Krishna, Prajalpaka, taking to the chanting. I was just reading 2 nights ago in the Prabhupada Lilamrita. In 1971, Srila Prabhupada went to Gainesville, Florida, I think just for one day. And because he said to the devotees, anyone that can pay his travel expenses as well as $1,000 for anyone that could do that, he would come and visit their temple. So the devotees there at Gainesville in Florida, they did that. Prabhupada just flew there for one day. And he was asked by one news reporter, how would I recognize a true follower of the Krishna consciousness movement by his behavior? What would his traits be? And Prabhupada gave a very interesting answer, like all of Prabhupada's answers. This one's particularly relevant for our discussion. Prabhupada said he will be a very perfect gentleman, that's all. You could not find any fault in him. So that's Prabhupada's definition of both a follower of the Krishna consciousness movement and a perfect gentleman. That you cannot find any fault in them. So this is our goal, how to become true followers of the Krishna consciousness movement, and therefore how to become perfect gentlemen, how to become faultless. So our topic is character development. Towards the end of last year, I gave a little seminar, several classes for the devotees at the Paramakaruna Ashram on this topic. And I thought it's, given our context today, it's worth repeating it. I've condensed those classes down into one class. We won't go into a lot of detail, but hopefully there'll be some time for questions after the presentation. And I've also embellished things a little bit after some more reflection on this topic. So hopefully it won't be too repetitive for the PKA devotees who have heard this before. Of course, Srila Prabhupada says repetition is not a fault in spiritual understanding and spiritual teaching. It's a strength, because we need to hear things again and again so that we understand the subject matter thoroughly. Still, hopefully we can give some more embellishment to what we presented towards the end of last year for PKA. Now, in our progressive journey to becoming devotees with faultless character, as Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here in his answer to this news reporter, we find ourselves situated in an ocean of faults. That is Shukadev Goswami's description of Kali Yuga. Dosha Nidhe. Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. Just as if you go to the ocean, you can't count the waves. Similarly, in the age of Kali, you cannot count the faults. It's just an unlimited ocean. So, the ocean of faults, we're situated in that ocean of faults, on our way to becoming, hopefully, faultless devotees, perfect gentlemen or ladies. And so naturally there's a bit of a struggle, at least for some time, in developing our character. We should clearly understand what the source of all the faults are in the ocean of faults. They have a source. And the answer may be surprising, particularly for a non-devotee or even a new devotee practitioner. What is the source of all the faults in the ocean of faults, that is the age of Kali? The basis of the Western attempt at civilization is illicit sex life. You may remember how Krishna explains in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that the demoniac have clearly ascertained the highest goal of life. What is that goal? Kama upabhoga parama. To gratify the senses. That's the ultimate goal. And it's the beginning, it's the end, it's the middle of everything in society today. And that culminates in illicit sex life. You go and get an education, and you're taught, number one, you are the body, and therefore the natural conclusion, number two, is you should enjoy the body. The politicians are all campaigning, elect us, we'll give you more opportunities to make money and enjoy the body. In economics, the message is just make money somehow, no matter how you destroy yourself or destroy society or destroy the environment. Make money somehow and enjoy the body. And when we say enjoy the body, we mean ultimately that thing. And of course, that's why we have science to help us out. Are you guys still there? Can see Shivananda's phone.
Yes, we're still here. Good.
Still there. All right. I just saw Joel disappeared for a minute. And science, of course, gives us so many benedictions. You want illicit sex? Hey, we got you, man. We can give you contraception. We can give you abortion. We can give you Viagra. We can give you internet pornography. We can give you online dating, social media, sex toys, whatever you need to get the job done. We're here for you. Now, although it's considered the goal of life by, let's be generous and say most people in the age of Kali, the reality is that all personal and social faults and environmental faults ultimately come from this thing, illicit sex life. Now you may wonder how that works. Well, if we look at the Bhagavad Gita, even in the first chapter, this is pointed out, where Arjuna gives one reason for not wanting to fight the battle, that if he fights and kills so many soldiers in the battle, there'll be Vana Sankara, unwanted population. That is the result of, one of the results of illicit sex life. Vana Sankara means, just like we hear in this verse today, Yavana, the unclean, those who are not of good quality, those who are not competent to follow a real human civilization. So illicit sex life creates Vana Sankara, unwanted, low quality children, because the consciousness of the parents at the time of procreation attracts a certain caliber of child to the womb of the mother. So if the consciousness is filled with lust and anger and greed, that's the kind of child that you attract to the womb at the time of conception. Naturally, such children are geared to sinful activities. Naturally, they're averse to following authority, and they're also naturally averse to spiritual inquiry, which is the actual purpose of having a human body, atato brahma jigyasa. Illicit sex life also increases body consciousness in general. It makes one selfish, it makes one exploitative, it increases dissatisfaction, frustration, and anger. People don't make that connection today. Remember, Krishna says, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha. Lust must turn into anger because it's never satisfied. And therefore, as he says, it's Maha Ashana, it's all devouring. Iha Vairinam, it's the actual all devouring enemy of the world. So there are 3 gates, as you know, to degradation, and that lust is the first one. Lust leads to the other 2, anger and greed. When your lust is not satisfied, you either become angry or you become greedy. Still, because people don't want to give up lust, they don't have any higher goal in life, they can't make the connection between these things. We're educated to think we're the body, we're sure it's the essence of life, enjoying the body, and something that no one can live without. So in Kali Yuga, what we want is we want the facility for illicit sex life without the reactions. And therefore so much of what the social institutions deal with, that means the police, the justice system, the corrections department, the health system, the social workers, counsellors, psychologists, so much of what they're dealing with or trying to deal with is the results of illicit sex life. They try to mop up the mess after the fact. No one can cure the actual disease and go to the root cause because they don't think it's a disease. So they just try to cure the symptoms of the disease, mop things up as best they can, and onward and upward, so to speak. Why don't they want to deal with the root cause of all faults? Because, again, Kam Upaboga Parama. It's the ultimate goal. So no one can live without it. Yeah, it causes some problems, but hey, you got to do what you got to do. So, although we get an education generally in this world, in the age of Kali, and that education is to make money so we can enjoy the body, the Bhagavatam explains that the real purpose of education is not economic development, it's character development, because that's essential to fulfill the real goal of life, the real human mission. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have good character, it's a fact, you'll be miserable and frustrated. And you'll also miss out on the actual wealth of the human body, which is the capacity to purify your existence and to understand and attain the ultimate goal of life. Real happiness, what Lord Rishabhdev calls Brahma Sokyam Tvanantam, ever increasing spiritual bliss. So when there's actual education in society and therefore good character, we get a perpetual system that encourages genuine education and genuine educators. We get social stability, particularly family stability. We get an interest in self-realization in society, and we get respect for authority, which is particularly necessary for spiritual progress, but of course it's also necessary just for mundane social harmony, which, as you can see today, is rapidly diminishing. So this is why Krishna says that one who's escaped these three gates headed by lust performs acts conducive to self-realization, because they have the character necessary, and they've created also a social structure that understands what the ultimate goal of life is and supports the attainment of that ultimate goal, self-realization. So where do we begin with character development? We have to begin with education, because our life and our character proceeds from our education. And when we say education, we mean primarily an understanding of who we are, what we're really supposed to be doing in this world, and how to attain the ultimate goal. And for real education, the first requirement would be completely shocking for most people today. And that requirement is celibacy. Because illicit sex life, that's the root of all faults, and it covers our real knowledge. You may remember Krishna explains that in the Bhagavad Gita. Avritam jnanam. Avritam jnanam etena jnanino nitya vairina. Lust is called the eternal enemy of the living entity because it covers his original knowledge. So therefore the first step in character development, which is dependent on education, is celibacy. In the traditional culture, for men, that's called brahmacharya, and for women it's called chastity. So once this educational prerequisite is in place, we can then start to cultivate qualities that constitute good character. We can then start to truly become perfect gentlemen. And today we'll look at 3 points that constitute becoming a gentleman and also a lady, 3 for each. Of course, this is an all-male class, so we'll be concentrating mainly on the man developing the man's character. But it's important to understand also what constitutes the character development for women. Who is a real lady? Because in case you haven't noticed, most men do marry, at least at some time in their life. And it's good to know for those who are desirous of that particular path, what candidates are worthy of serious consideration and which to pass on. And also for those who want to go solo, the overwhelming minority, it's good to know who to give from the opposite gender an especially wide berth so that one can actually be successful in maintaining one's brihadvrata. So we'll touch on that, but we'll be giving the main attention to the men. So we've got three traits that we can look at today for character development in men, and each of those has, you could say, three aspects as well. So the three traits for men, or in other words, how to be a gentleman, are humility, responsibility, and sensitivity. So humility, let's take a look at that one. The male ego wants to assert itself as the Lord. So I am the master, I'm independent, I'm powerful. If you want a good metaphor for the male ego, you can think of the king of the jungle. You've seen the male lions in the jungle? It's a good metaphor for this, for the male ego. The male ego wants to be the king of the jungle, whether it's the forest jungle or the urban jungle. Wants to be the Lord. Last thing he wants to be is the humble servant. So it's the opposite, actually, of the real ego of the soul. So this is a main reason for celibacy in education, because when there's illicit sex, the male ego goes through the roof. The man really believes that he's the king of the jungle. And this is also a reason that the celibate student, the brahmachari, begs on behalf of the guru, because it really, just practically speaking, puts the male ego in its place. Begging means sometimes you get something and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're respected, sometimes you're not. So it's a very practical way to culture humility and to understand that I'm not the king of the jungle. Now, humility we can also divide up into three aspects. Of course, there are many aspects of these things. We're just noting some down here for the discussion. One trait of humility is working under an authority. So we're all actually, contrary to our ego, we're all fully dependent on Krishna. We're not independent. But the male ego wants to think, I'm the boss. I'm not answerable to anyone. So again, this is why in traditional culture, a man is educated from boyhood to act under the guru's direction. That way, he's working under an authority, and he learns this very important lesson, that I'm not independent. Another trait of humility is taking guidance. The male ego wants to think that I know everything. And as long as we think that, then we can't learn anything. If we think that we already know everything, how can we actually learn anything? And therefore there's a need for humility so that we can actually learn. Lord Chaitanya, he gave this example himself. He showed how to be a real disciple. You can read about that in the Adi Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the 7th chapter. And you remember he started chanting Hare Krishna on the order of his guru and immediately became ecstatic. All these ecstatic symptoms began to manifest. So he thought that he'd lost all his spiritual knowledge by following the order of his guru. But as a sincere disciple, he presented the situation to his guru. He asked for guidance and found out something completely different to what he thought. His guru said, "Oh, don't worry, that's very good." And Prabhupada explains in the purport that Lord Chaitanya was displaying symptoms of a liberated soul when chanting. But even in his liberated condition, he referred everything to his spiritual master whenever there were doubts. And Prabhupada says thus, in any condition, even when liberated, we should never think ourselves independent of the spiritual master, but must refer to him as soon as there is some doubt regarding our progressive spiritual life. So this is humility, taking guidance, even if we're liberated. And not just taking guidance, but actually looking for guidance. In other words, not just doing it in some kind of mechanical, mundane way, but actually being eager for it, being greedy to get guidance. The more we have, the wealthier we are. That's the way that we should think about it. There's also one perhaps hidden disadvantage of avoiding this principle of guidance, and that is that we miss out on love. We miss out on love between devotees. Often we may not consider it like that, but taking guidance is a loving exchange. You remember Rupa Goswami explains in the Nectar of Instruction, it's a priti lakshanam. It's a symptom of love to give and receive guidance. So perhaps because we're in male bodies, we may think, well, I don't need any love. So that's another very important way to look at this principle of guidance. Yes, whether I know it or not, I'm looking for love. How do I get that? Well, Rupa Goswami's given 6 ways in the Nectar of Instruction, and 2 of them constitute guidance. Giving guidance, that's giving love. Receiving guidance, that's receiving love. And the more advanced we are in bhakti, the more we realize that. And the third trait of humility is owning our decisions. Now this means not blaming other people, particularly Krishna or devotees, for the apparent misfortune that may come into our lives. Unfortunately, sometimes devotees do this. They may even do this to people that have tried to help them. It's very unfortunate. And it comes from a lack of humility, actually. In the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada explains, in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse 8, it is said, "My dear Lord, any person who is constantly awaiting your causeless mercy to be bestowed upon him, and who goes on suffering the resultant actions of his past misdeeds, offering you respectful obeisances from the core of his heart, is surely eligible to become liberated, for it has become his rightful claim." And he goes on to say, This statement of Srimad Bhagavatam should be the guide of all devotees. A devotee should not expect immediate relief from the reactions of his past misdeeds. No conditioned soul is free from such reactionary experiences, because material existence means continued suffering or enjoying of past activities. He says a devotee who is not perfectly freed from the resultant actions should therefore continue to act in Krishna consciousness seriously, even though there may be so many impediments. When such impediments arise, he should simply think of Krishna and expect his mercy. That is the only solace. If the devotee passes his days in that spirit, it is certain that he is going to be promoted to the abode of the Lord. By such activities he earns his claim to enter into the kingdom of God. The exact word used in this verse is daya-bhak. Daya-bhak refers to a son's becoming the lawful inheritor of the property of the father. In a similar way, a pure devotee who is prepared to undergo all kinds of tribulations in executing Krishna-conscious duties becomes lawfully qualified to enter into the transcendental abode. So owning our decisions. We've made decisions in the past. Some of them were better than others, and we're getting reactions for those decisions. So we have to own the decisions and the results of the decisions. We may not understand what decisions we made in the past that are causing the apparent misfortune in our life right now. But Shastra informs us that whatever is coming to us is atmakritam vipakam. Whatever vipakam, misfortune is coming to us is eva atmakritam, certainly done by oneself. Therefore, we should not blame other people for our apparent misfortune. It means that we don't understand this principle of the Bhagavatam if we're doing that. So this is humility, working under authority, taking guidance, and owning our decisions. The next aspect of becoming a gentleman we'll look at is responsibility. To be a responsible man, what does that mean? Basically, it means to grow up and act like an adult. And this doesn't happen for men without education and training, which means that most of the men today are really just overgrown babies. We can see that because they're simply interested in sense gratification, particularly certain kinds of sense gratification, and boy toys, and therefore they can't give any real masculinity to society. They can't give any real protection to the women, to the children, and particularly no spiritual protection. Some common examples of irresponsibility: intoxication. Rare to find a man who doesn't take some kind of intoxication. Sports, skateboarding, gaming, pornography, gambling, chasing women around, performing criminal activities. Of course, there are so many. These are just a few very obvious ones that we can see every day. Why are they irresponsible? Because they don't add any value to the man, and they don't add any value to anybody else either. Actually, all they do is they take away the man's ability to be a man, to give shelter, particularly spiritual shelter. So we'll have a look at 3 traits of responsibility. The first one is mind and sense control. So man becomes truly powerful not by going to the gym, but by controlling his mind and senses, by becoming adept at self-mastery. That means controlling the lower self, the mind and the senses, with the higher self. And this means that he becomes powerful, not necessarily physically powerful, but he becomes powerful in elevating himself, elevating his consciousness, and elevating others. So that is real power. Remember, Srila Prabhupada explains in the Nectar of Instruction, in his preface to that book, that he says in all spiritual affairs, one's first duty is to control his mind and senses. Unless one controls his mind and senses, one cannot make any advancement in spiritual life. Everyone within this material world is engrossed in the modes of passion and ignorance. One must promote himself to the platform of goodness, sattva guna, by following the instructions of Rupa Goswami. And then everything concerning how to make further progress will be revealed. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So that attitude upon which advancement in Krishna consciousness depends primarily is the attitude towards controlling the mind and the senses. What does this mean practically? Srila Prabhupada gives a nice succinct description of this in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, in his purport to text 4 to 5. He says, control of the senses means that the senses should not be used for unnecessary personal enjoyment. There is no prohibition against meeting the proper needs of the senses, but unnecessary sense enjoyment is detrimental for spiritual advancement. Therefore, the senses should be restrained from unnecessary use. Similarly, one should restrain the mind from unnecessary thoughts. That is called shama. One should not spend one's time pondering over earning money. That is a misuse of the thinking power. The mind should be used to understand the prime necessity of human beings, and that should be presented authoritatively. The power of thought should be developed in association with persons who are authorities in the scriptures, saintly persons and spiritual masters, and whose thinking is highly developed. So that is mind and sense control, one of the 3 traits of responsibility. We have a responsibility to try our best to control our mind and senses. The next trait is dutiful. So dutiful means that we have duties to perform, and we should carry those duties out regardless of how we feel, regardless of the apparent impediments there are to performing them. In other words, we shouldn't be whimsical. Now, here are a few categories of duties that we can consider here. First of all, if we're initiated devotees, then we have initiation vows. We have a duty to carry those vows out. Also, if we're aspiring for initiation, the initiation vows are to follow the 4 regulative principles and to chant a minimum of 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna mantra every day, and also to try to give up the offences in chanting. So that's one duty, initiation vows. Then we have other aspects of sadhana. So we have a duty to read Srila Prabhupada's books. If we have deities, we have a duty to worship the deities. We all have the duty to somehow or other try to reach out and help others become Krishna conscious. Then there is our varna and our ashram. Varna means our occupation. Whatever our occupational duties are, we should do those to the best of our ability. Ashram, the same. The varnas and ashrams have various duties, but whatever they are, we should try to understand them and try to apply them as best we can according to the time, place and circumstance. Then we have duties to the body and the mind, physical duties, mental duties. We have to try to maintain our health. That's a duty. Our physical health. We have to try and maintain our mental health. Or if we have physical or mental health problems, then we have a duty to do our best to try to rectify those things. If we have personal issues from the past, addictions, past traumas which may affect our practice of bhakti, our devotional relationships, we have a duty to try our best to deal with those things, to mitigate them. So that's dutiful. And then the third aspect of responsibility is protection. Protection means that one gives up one's own comforts or conveniences for the welfare of others. So this is particularly prominent for Kshatriyas. I don't know how many Kshatriyas we have. Not so many from what I can see. But we read about this a lot in Bhagavatam. Kshatriyas like Parikshit, Rantidev, Shibi had extraordinary capacity to give protection. The Kshatriyas have the Ishwar Bhava, the tendency to control, but that control is for the purpose of giving protection. You remember Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that he's the strength of the strong, which is devoid of passion and desire. That means that a strong man's strength should be used to protect the weak. And the most important type of protection is to protect oneself and others from ignorance. That is particularly the duty of brahmanas. They have that calling in life. First of all, to protect themselves, and secondly, to protect others from ignorance. The idea that I am this body and that I can enjoy in this world through the body. So men are the protectors in society, and if they can't protect or give shelter to others, then they can't feel good about themselves. They can't have a proper self-esteem. And that's one reason, a main reason, why we see so many men have depression. Even many, unfortunately, try to end their lives. So protection is essential even for the man just to have a proper self-esteem. So this is responsibility, mind and sense control, duty consciousness, and giving protection. Our final aspect is of becoming a gentleman is sensitivity. Now, when we think of a man being sensitive, we may think that it means someone who's emotionally weak or very easily upset. That's not what we're referring to here. Sensitive in the context of our discussion means that we're aware of our environment. What is our environment? Who's in our environment? And what's in our environment? And how should we interact with that environment in a gentlemanly way, in a proper way? It's very rare to find a man today who is like this. I get so many examples practically every day here on Willis Street of men who are just unconscious of their environment race up and down the street in their cars. It's so loud. Of course, I just think this is a reaction to my past activities. I used to do that myself, as embarrassing as it is to say that. You can see, and I can reflect on my own life before trying to be a devotee, how you just don't care about anybody else. You don't care about the environment, how you're affecting it. Race up and down the street in your car. It's so loud. It's so dangerous. And then you get, on Saturdays particularly, and Sundays here, we get Harley Davidsons, just one after another. Or the guys turn up their stereo really loud. They don't drive fast, but they just turn the stereo right up. Some people, their stereo is so loud it shakes the bass, it shakes the whole building. And you get guys on a Friday, Saturday night just running up and down the street yelling, intoxicated. Not conscious of the environment. We may think this is like being manly and being a man, being macho, but actually it's the opposite. So men, they generally need training to become conscious of their environment, and then they need to learn how to be sensitive to that environment and to the people and other living entities in the environment. So 3 traits of sensitivity. The first one is to become conscious of the environment. Remember, Srila Prabhupada said, first become conscious, then become Krishna conscious. What is my environment? Am I in my place at the moment? Or am I in someone else's place? Now, these things, they might seem very rudimentary, but the reason that I bring them up is because I've noticed in the last year or two how just there are men in the community or that frequent the community who don't seem to get these points. So what is my environment? Is this my place or is this someone else's place? If it's my place, then obviously I make the rules. But if it's somebody else's place, they make the rules. Now, if I go to Bhakti Lounge, it's not my place, but it's Bhakti Lounge's place. If I'm going to be a gentleman, I need to harmonize with the rules of that place. If I go to the loft, it's the same. If I go to the brahmachari ashram, it's the same. Or even things just like the weather. Is it hot or cold? Is it sunny or is it raining? It's amazing how many men I see down here on the street who don't seem to notice. They just seem to dress the same regardless of the weather. So the all-round, all-season dress is shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops, right? Whether it's hot or cold, whether it's sunny or raining. It's like yesterday it was raining like anything. It's raining now. Even this New Year's Day yesterday, weren't that many people around, but I saw several guys just walking around in the rain, t-shirt and shorts. Not a problem. Again, you think, oh, that's being a man, that's being really like robust and tough, but it could also be just ignorance. Just not being conscious of what's happening in the environment. Is the environment formal? Is the environment casual? Obviously, if it's a formal environment, it's a different kind of dress required to if it's a casual environment. If it's raining, there's a different kind of dress required to if it's not raining. And who's in the environment? Is it men and women? Or is it just men? Obviously, that's an important consideration in terms of how I behave. If it's just men, I can be more relaxed. If it's men and women, I have to be more guarded. Let's take ordinary services that we consider to be ordinary. Of course, they're not ordinary because they're devotional service, but services we do every day, like let's say playing the mridanga. So someone's drumming, playing the mridanga in a kirtan. What's the environment? Am I leading the kirtan myself, just in my room? Am I at the temple? Is it a Mongol arti? Am I doing a sound lab kind of introductory kirtan presentation? What's the situation? What's the environment? That will determine how I play the drum, hopefully. Because I notice that quite often the men, they just have this, they kind of have two settings, for drumming. It's like off or inferno, like there's just very little or no grey area, all right? But if we're conscious of our environment, then we're flexible. In this environment, I play like this. In that environment, I play like that. Same for leading kirtan. Same for cooking. Same for speaking, giving a presentation. Who's the audience? What are they expecting? What are they not expecting? This is just being conscious of the environment. And of course, if we're in an environment with other people, it's possible that they expect some kind of communication from us. It might be worth considering that. Remember that the basis of bhakti is actually communication. We may not think of it in that way. What are the two first processes of bhakti yoga? First of all, there's shravanam, that means hearing, right? Hearing is half of communication. What's the other one? The second one? Kirtanam, chanting or speaking. That's the other half of communication. In other words, Krishna is trying to communicate to us. He's chanting in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Manmana bhavamad bhakta. Always think of me, become my devotee. That's half of the communication. The other half is that we hear it. We have to hear that. And if we do, then there's actual communication going on. And then we're supposed to reciprocate with that. Then we're supposed to chant Hare Krishna. That's half of the communication in terms of reciprocating with Krishna's communication. And then Krishna hears that. He hears our chanting. And then the communication is complete. And of course, according to the quality of our chanting, to that degree Krishna will hear nicely, and to that degree our relationship develops. So where is the development of a relationship of any kind without communication? Nothing happens. So this is also part of just being conscious of the environment. Next aspect of sensitivity is cleanliness. These last two are relatively short. When we're conscious of our environment, we're aware of the state of our environment. We're aware, is it dirty? Is it clean? Brahmanas are known as suchi, clean. They're always cleaning, always trying to make the place cleaner. And then we have our own environment, our body, so that should be clean. Our clothing, that should be clean. The environment should be clean, tidy, and orderly. And the last aspect of sensitivity is compassion. There are others in the world, and they have feelings, they have needs, they have preferences. And compassion means caring for and serving those things in other people. Caring for the needs of others, caring for the preferences of others, caring for how they feel. It means kind of getting out of man cave-ness, if that's a word. You mean they like their cave, like I'm a real cave dweller. and it's just you and how you feel and your needs and your preferences. But the gentleman is compassionate, sensitive to others, and the man naturally feels good about himself when he's like that, when he's compassionate, when he's serving the needs of others. So those are the three aspects of sensitivity, or three traits: conscious, cleanliness, and compassion. Now the ladies' aspects, go over those very quickly. To be a lady, the Bhagavatam explains three things: shyness, satisfaction, and a mood of nourishing. So the ladies, they have this tendency, in case you hadn't noticed, I'm sure you guys are all transcendental, but in case you're not always transcendental, you may have noticed that ladies have a mood of wanting to attract attention, right? And they do that through their dress primarily, and how they decorate themselves. At least initially, that's their process. So if a lady is shy, then she's trying to control that mood of wanting to attract attention. Therefore, her dress, she dresses accordingly. Things like mini skirts don't fit in to the definition of shyness. Neither do shorts. Anyway, I think you know what I mean. The ladies dress and they cover up the body. All right, doesn't mean the dress can't be attractive. It just means that the form of the body is covered up. And this is considered the beauty for women, this quality of shyness. Completely foreign to both women and men today. But the real attraction of women is the mystery. It's not having everything on display. At least for someone who's cultured, the real attraction in a woman is the mystery, what's not being revealed. So Prabhupada explains that this shyness in women, this is actually the control valve for how society goes up or down. And when the control valve is loosened and women think that they should just put all the merchandise out on display, everyone becomes degraded. The men and the women. So the men, the intelligent men, they've thought, hey, this is great. We've convinced all the women to just be free for everybody to plunder. This is fantastic. And all the women think, yeah, don't cover yourself up. Put it all out on display. That's freedom. So the men think, oh, this is great. They don't realize that this destroys the women and them as well. It destroys their ability to be men, actually, to give protection, to give shelter. So this control valve, the Bhagavatam says, for women is shyness. So that has to be this mood of wanting to attract attention has to be controlled. Another thing for them is satisfaction. So the woman's mind always wants more and more, and wants varieties of enjoyment. It's very rarely satisfied with what it has. If it is, it's very, very fleeting. So that means varieties of everything, right? Varieties of dresses, varieties of food, varieties of decorations, varieties of just changing the situation, destinations, travel locations, and particularly men. So the Bhagavatam says, be satisfied with one man and what he can provide. Now, he can provide for you varieties, but only him. You can't have varieties outside of that relationship. You be satisfied with him, and whatever varieties he can provide. And then nourishing. So the ladies, they can either have a mood of nourishing others or a mood of taking from others. The Bhagavatam gives the examples of the mother. That's why we call ladies Mataji, like the mother. Well, that's one reason. And the other mood they can have is of a tigress. So I don't know if you've ever seen tigresses. You can have a look online on YouTube and see some tigresses, but and you'll see they're ferocious. So the tigress, she's out for herself, whereas the mother, she is there to give, to nourish the family, to nourish the child. So these three aspects, Bhagavatam explains, constitute, in general, what it means to be a lady. Shyness, satisfaction, and nourishing. So if we can develop our character, it will make our bhakti a lot easier, whether we're men or women, particularly in terms of our association with other devotees, which is, according to Lord Chaitanya, the root cause of our progress in bhakti. How do we cultivate our character? As we heard in today's verse, it's primarily through strong sadhana, particularly chanting the holy name. If that's there, then gradually and organically our good character as perfect gentlemen or ladies will develop. Also, serving the Bhagavatam explains. By serving the Bhagavatas, we naturally purify the lower character, and the higher character comes out. And that's because we take on the qualities of those we serve. So if we serve the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, naturally we take on their qualities and our character develops, meaning our good character develops. We can also practice these points: humility, responsibility, and sensitivity, and other aspects of the mode of goodness. And Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavad Gita that if one wants, he can develop by practice the mode of goodness and thus defeat the modes of ignorance and passion. So, practice. Practice makes perfect. That's true in all things, material and spiritual. And Prabhupada explains that, as we heard in that quote from the Nectar of Instruction, that cultivating the mode of goodness is essential for progressive bhakti. He explains in his purport to Bhagavad Gita 16:24, he says that in human society, aversion to the principles of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all fall downs. That means aversion to devotional service, because those principles of devotional service are the principles of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You cannot understand Him any other way. So in human society, aversion to devotional service, is what he's saying, is the cause of all fall downs. That is the greatest offence of human life. Therefore, Maya, the material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always giving us trouble in the shape of the threefold miseries. This material energy is constituted of the three modes of material nature. One has to raise himself at least to the mode of goodness before the path to understanding the Supreme Lord can be opened. Without raising oneself to the standard of the mode of goodness, one remains in ignorance and passion, which are the cause of demoniac life. Those in the modes of passion and ignorance deride the scriptures, deride the holy man, and deride the proper understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They disobey the instructions of the spiritual master, and they do not care for the regulations of the scriptures. In spite of hearing the glories of devotional service, they are not attracted. Thus they manufacture their own way of elevation. These are some of the defects of human society which lead to the demoniac status of life. If, however, one is able to be guided by a proper and bona fide spiritual master who can lead one to the path of elevation to the higher stage, then one's life becomes successful. So cultivating the mode of goodness, practicing these aspects. Again, though, we want to stress chanting, because as we hear in today's verse, that was the point that Kaviraj Goswami was making. If we're chanting sincerely, these qualities of the mode of goodness will gradually become attractive and start to manifest in our character as natural symptoms of Lord Chaitanya's mercy. Prabhupada said in the purport, the members of the present Krishna consciousness movement were not born in India. Perhaps at that time that was the case. He's talking particularly about Westerners. And at the beginning of the Krishna consciousness movement, basically all of his followers were Westerners. Nor do they belong to the Vedic culture, but within the short time of 4 or 5 years, they have become such wonderful devotees simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra that even in India they are well received as perfectly well-behaved Vaishnavas wherever they go. Everywhere people express this astonishment, and we take great pride in the transcendental behaviour of our students. Such wonders are possible, however, only by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They are not ordinary or mundane. Hare Krishna. That's our little presentation for this evening. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to add?
Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, Bhakti Trent.
Very well.
Hare Krishna.
Sometimes it seems like we might have this knowledge, like that we need to control our senses, but we might even come to the realization that we're so ignorant that we don't even want to do that. So
You're too fallen for Bhakti.
what do we do when we feel like that? 'Cause
Are you saying you're too fallen for Bhakti?
no, not necessarily. I hope not.
Well, according to Narottam Das Thakur, the more fallen we are, or the more fallen we think we are, the more qualified we are for Lord Chaitanya's mercy. Patita pavana hetu tava avatar, Mosama patita prabhu na pai bear. Patita pavana hetu tava avatar. He says, your incarnation's just to reclaim the fallen conditioned souls, but you won't find anyone more fallen than I am. Therefore my claim is first. My claim to your mercy is first, because I'm the most fallen. So if we can just stay in the association of devotees and not make any offences, even though we may be so fallen, we will gradually be elevated by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, by the power of the chanting of the holy name, the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. We will gradually be elevated. We just have to stay in the association of devotees and not make offences. And of course, falling down is optional. We don't have to fall down. We can choose, because we have human intelligence, how to respond to various pushing agents. So we may have weak determination, but if we choose with our independence to associate with those who have more determination than us, guess what? We'll get more determination. But we just have to make that conscious choice. And that, of course, is up to each individual. Nobody can do that for us. That's our responsibility. Okay? Hare Krishna. Anybody else have anything?
Hare Krishna Mahavan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Shamanga.
Thank you for your wonderful class and giving us such a thorough analysis of what it means to be a man in Krishna consciousness. You mentioned about self-esteem, how that's something that's a problem with men today. And so I wanted to ask basically if you have any techniques or you know any practical techniques how men can overcome this in Krishna consciousness.
Understand the self. If you can't understand the self, how are you going to have real self-esteem? We have to understand the self as Jivera Swarupoi Krishnera Nityadas, the eternal servant of Krishna. You act in that way, you'll get real self-esteem. Otherwise, what is the value of so-called self-esteem separate from Krishna? What is the value of it? Real self-esteem you see in the activities of Advaita Acharya, who would be quietly taking prasadam with the devotees and then spontaneously jump up and leap in the air. Chaitanya Das Muni, Chaitanya Das, Chaitanya Das Muni, Tanra Das Ir Das. He would just spontaneously call out, I am the servant of Lord Chaitanya. I am the servant of Lord Chaitanya. I am the servant of his servants. That's real self-esteem. You can try it. He's showing us. That's how you do it. Okay.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anything else, gentlemen?
Hare Krishna Mahavan Prabhu.
Shiva Sharan. Hare Krishna.
I had a question about what does humility look like when we're dealing with juniors? Because to present oneself as a beginner may make it difficult for the junior to hear from you or be inspired from you perhaps. But to present oneself as competent and somewhat advanced, maybe proud, it doesn't seem like humility. So what does humility really look like when dealing with junior?
Humility ultimately means to surrender to Krishna. Someone who's surrendered to Krishna is humble. Someone who's not surrendered is going the other way. So if someone's a junior, then how do you serve Krishna? How do you surrender to Krishna in the relationship with a junior? What is your answer? So you have a relationship with a devotee you consider to be a junior. How do you surrender to Krishna in that relationship?
You act as their servant.
You act as their servant, yeah, that's right. More specifically, Bhagavatam says, Maitri, you become friendly to all the devotees of the Lord. So that friendship is shown in different ways according to our position and the position of the other devotee. So with a junior devotee, Bhagavatam says, Kripa, you show mercy, compassion. So that's humility. To show compassion to a younger practitioner, someone that we consider younger, that is surrendering to Krishna in that relationship. That is humility. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu.
It's a good question. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Anyone else want to ask something or add anything? Otherwise we can finish. Grateful for your good company tonight and to be able to do a little service at the festival. Wishing everyone the best for the new year. Hoping that it will be a successful one for you all in your Krishna consciousness. Thanks again for the opportunity. My privilege, my pleasure. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Have a great rest of the festival, gentlemen. Hare Krishna.